What is up, everyone? I am back here with Don Hutcheson. Thank you for joining us for the continuation of our conversation around figuring out what you want to do in life, especially if you are supporting high school students right now who are trying to figure out what in the world they want to do with their lives. Just as a quick refresher, Don is an incredible entrepreneur, educator, inventor, coach, and author. He's really studied how people discover their talents and make the most of their abilities. So, Don, welcome back. Excited to continue the conversation with you.
I am excited to be back. I enjoyed our first chat, and this takes us to a seminal point because we talked about in the first episode just the complexity of these decisions. It's always been complicated for a myriad of reasons. The systems we live in, and there's so many facets to this decision about ourselves. So, as we started studying this about 3 decades ago, and the where to start piece, if you ask out in the world, listeners, if you ask your listeners out there, you ask listeners, that probably 98% of them would say, well, you start with your why. What do you want to get into and what has meaning for you? And while I think that's a seminal question among many seminal questions, our experience is the first question to ask is, who am I? That was on the Oracle at Delphi, right? Know thyself. And but more important than the philosophical side, Richard Bowles, the What Color is Your Parachute genius for many, many decades, followed up on literally 8 decades of research. That's 80 years of research that these scientists have done. And if you know who you are from the inside out, and we are, as you know, intellectual, physical, spiritual, emotional, social beings, if you know who you are, until you know who you are, you can't really develop your why and your what and your how and your when. And people that do that are like almost 90% more able to create lives on their own terms. So that's where we got started with this idea of the Discover Your Talent program, but based on an earlier company I co-founded. And it led us into an understanding of, as you talked about earlier in our discussions, of innate talents and abilities, which we'll go into in more detail in just a minute. But again, I think it's just very key for listeners, students or parents, to understand that you don't want to be getting into the tactical sides of where you want to go to school next and what you want to major in. Those are vital issues, very similar, but until you do the inside work, and we have a whole process to help you do that, as do you, Blake, it's going to be difficult to really get a clear path that gets you where you want to go with the less stress and the most effectiveness.
Right. I love that distinction because I think start with why, the Simon Sinek TED Talk that was so popular
Yeah,
is really important
I love
for
Simon.
determining your values, right?
Right,
Like
right.
ultimately the question of why is like, why do you do what you do? And to your point, figuring out the who is really important to figure out. If you can figure out who you are, then you can figure out how you want to live out your values in a way that doesn't cause you endless frustration or, feel like you're just struggling uphill all the time. And that's a really important distinction because often people think, oh, I want to change the world in this particular way. And that's beautiful. I love that inspiration, that vision. And in terms of how they do that, I think a lot of people get stuck and frustrated because they think, oh, if I want to, advocate for improving the environment, then I need to go be an environmental scientist. Well, if your current set of skills and abilities are not very aligned with you becoming an environmental scientist, you probably spend a lot of years really frustrated rather than actually doing the thing you love and making the impact you want to have. And
Which, by
Don,
the
maybe you
way,
could talk.
if you know your abilities, forgive me for interrupting, but if you know your abilities, you may not be the scientist in the environmental issue. You may be the marketing person. You may be the operations person. You may be, there's a zillion roles in that space that aren't the science role.
Exactly. And in the work I do with high school students, so much of that is saying, hey, what is the thing you're passionate about? What do you love? And sometimes students say it's, video games or sports or music or writing, whatever that thing is. I say, awesome. Let's look at your current skill set and think about the different ways you might be able to participate. Because if you love sports, maybe you're not the athlete, but yeah, maybe you're the marketer. Maybe you design stadiums. Maybe
Exactly.
you manage communities of fans. There's so many different skill sets rather than just, oh, I love the one thing, therefore I'm going to try to do the most obvious route, when the non-obvious route might have so many possibilities and opportunities.
Well, you couldn't be more right. And as I said, we started studying this problem back in 1990, or this situation. And it's the reason that it's so, you express that beautifully. The reason it's so complicated is people don't know how multifaceted they are. They think they are what they learn in school, their knowledge, or they think that they are what their fascinations and interests. Like you said, you want to be an environmental scientist, or I want to help the world through environmental science. That's a value. Or they think that they are some other aspect of themselves, when in fact all the aspects are important. And we figured out by studying for several years the great brilliant women and men scientists and philosophers and psychologists and developmental people, and found that there are over many decades, there are 8 factors that impact these decisions. And so those literally are, to be explicit, they're your innate abilities, which we'll go into in some detail, how you're hardwired. They're the skills, what you learn and pick up, your personal style. That's not just personality, but it's your personal approach to life, your interests and fascinations, your values, which are vital, your vision and goals, what age you are, what you care about at 15, evolves over time, but it's going to be different at 55. And then your influences from family. And those have, each of those factors have amazing impact, but you can't just pick one apart and peel it off and say, well, I'm just going to focus on that piece. Just like just like the why, you've got to look at yourself as a whole person.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction as well, that we are all of these things. And I think examining them is so important. So much of the work I do with growth mindset is getting a clear assessment of where are students in all of the areas that you mentioned. Have they thought about it? Has anyone ever asked them, how do
Right.
you feel? Yeah, how do you feel about this? What was it like for you growing up in this family or this environment? What do you
Yes.
care about? And so I think one of the biggest gifts we can give students in general is just our curiosity and helping them realize those 8 different factors exist at all, right? It's
Right.
not just they are good or bad, which I think is how the fixed mindset can hurt a lot of students, is thinking, oh, I'm all good or I'm all bad, not hear all the different parts of me. Some of them might interact better with certain environments or in certain contexts than others. I might be more effective in certain environments or certain contexts than others. But that doesn't mean I'm bad, or if I'm not great at a certain skill, doesn't mean I can't improve. It's just recognizing where is the baseline for students with all these questions.
Exactly. It couldn't be more right.
We're going to end our conversation here, but next time we're going to talk more about this idea of innate talents and abilities and the growth mindset, and how do we use the skills that we are born or develop very quickly into maybe mastery level skills, and how do we adjust some of the other things that we might not be great at when we start, and recognize, do I want to put in the work and effort to develop them? So, Don, I appreciate you so much taking the time to continue this conversation. Looking forward to the next session. And for anyone who's interested in finding out more about Don's Discover Your Talent program, click the link below. It's a really awesome program to help high school students figure out who they are, what their abilities are, and how to make the most of their lives. So, Don, thanks for being here today.
See you next time.